Hey y'all, it's old Jesse. I figured I would do the long form video on why I think agnosticism is respectable. Okay, so I'm pairing this with the atheist video for a reason because in my opinion, they go together. A lot of folks don't know whether they're agnostic or atheist. They know they've rejected God, but they don't know whether or not there really is a God, or maybe they're just angry and don't want to worship a God. And even though they think there's a possibility that he could exist. So, agnosticism is respectable because it says, well, maybe there's a God. There seems like there could be, you know, at least statistically, some math pointing to that. There seems like there could be some possible evidence to that. And I really don't know everything, so it's definitely a possibility of existence. That's a reasonable thought, you know? It's also reasonable to say, okay, I want to do with whatever I want to do with my life, and I don't want to believe in a God. Okay, that's fine. That's intellectually acknowledging what you want to do with your life and making a choice. Okay, I personally, I don't really agree with that choice, but it is your choice. So that's one of the reasons why I think agnosticism is respectable. It looks at things and it considers things in a proper frame of mind without too terrible much belligerence or anything like that, and says, this is what I want to do and I don't want to be that. Okay, now on the other hand, you've got the folks that are still searching. They grow up in a religion and they find out that their religion has flaws, and they're like, there's a God out there, but I don't know which one it is or who it is. And I believe in a creator, but I know that this religion isn't working for me, and I know that there's big flaws in it. Okay, that's the other form of agnostic, and I personally I like those better, because of course I'm a religious person, and I can sit down and talk with somebody like that. We have a lot in common, and usually the reason why they are the way they are is because they have a very intellectual, very considerate, very intelligent mind to arrive at that conclusion. Okay, and to be fair, most religions do have flaws. You know, like you look at the Bible, it's not translated properly into the English. That's a flaw. You know, you look at the history of the manuscripts, and there's all these flaws in that. That's a flaw. You look at Islam and the fact that they kill each other over there. Like all the time, even though it's supposed to be the religion of peace, it's not. That's a flaw. That's a big flaw. you know, you look at some of the Taoist beliefs in Hinduism and stuff, and like sometimes bad people are really successful, and so karma breaks. At least for a while. Um, or there's no immortality to it, and or they just don't want to do all the bowing and scraping at temple. You know, so there's a lot of reasons for for um, for looking for the creator, um, but not choosing religion. And if I hadn't had the exposure to knowledge that I have, I think that's probably where I would end up being. I don't think I don't think stopping the search is a good idea, though. And why would I say that? If you have an inquisitive mind and you're interested in gods, don't stop looking. You know, just because a certain religious Christian subsect is flawed or other religious subsect is flawed doesn't mean there's not a perfect one out there for you. You know, um, And kind of what I was trying to get at with some of the short videos was that, hey, there's a process that you can go through to eliminate some of these 3,000 something odd gods that folks have collected, uh, that supposedly ancient humans believed or modern humans believe. Um, so like one of those things is like, do you really want to worship a god that has human sacrifice? Those are off the list. You know, do you really want to worship a god that lies? I don't know. Maybe some people would, but not me. You know, do you really want to worship a god attached to a, a mythology that is for sure known to be fake? I mean, I guess some folks would go for it, but I kind of like historical evidence. So, do you really want to worship a god that has no offer of immortality? So, when you do things like that, the pit, the list can be the list can be pared down really fast. And don't blame the god for the followers' flaws. Like Christianity and Judaism has tons of flaws, okay? And a lot of them were human created. And, you know, with that goes like, don't blame the religion for the wars, unless it's part of the religion, like obviously the Crusades ended up being part of the religion, but a lot of wars are fought strictly for political reasons with religion used as a mask. So you can't blame the religion for the war if it was a politician that, decided to do it. Like you look at the past couple wars that we've had, you know, the war in Ukraine, has that got anything to do with religion? No. Does the Catholic Church support Putin? Yeah, it does. It preaches the fatherland. So like there you go, like that's not a religious war in Ukraine, but it could be attached to religion if you really wanted to. That's what I'm saying is politicians, you can't attach religion to the political aspect. Like that's usually a general assumption. And and the last thing with agnosticism and why I think it's respectable is like I've known folks to go through some really really bad stuff. Okay, whether that be cancers or disformity of a family member or rape or like just an absolutely abusive life upbringing or what have you. And sometimes the agnosticism comes from going, okay, well, I know there's a God because I was taught there's a God. Everything makes sense, but man, I've had it really rough. And if God loves me, then He needs to reach out to me. Well, I kind of get that. I understand that. That's a pretty good, like, considering the situation. That's a fairly decent way of feeling. That's you're being honest to your heart, you know. And I kind of think that if a person was to consider things from the God's perspective, what would He see in you or in your family or in your circumstances? Because a God is not responsible necessarily for the kindness of humanity. A God is not responsible to make everything happy and joyful. A God lives and 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 continues to exist for their own reason and for their own purpose. If we read too much into what the God should do, that's not giving the God free will in our minds, right? So, like we have free will, you need to realize that God has free will. And just because He hasn't handled your situation doesn't mean he couldn't if you had the right attitude and the right knowledge, right? So anyway, like, I understand why folks don't like religion. Personally, I don't go to a church. I study on my own. So I'm very much closer to that than others. And yes, I do deal with a lot of religious nonsense in terms of debate and stuff like that. And there are a lot of theological lies told to modern Christianity. So if the religion that you came from was Christianity and you're now rejecting it, I can understand why. A lot of times the teachings of the priests and pastors and stuff don't really even match the Greek or the Hebrew, and they don't want it to match because they have to support church tradition. And so that's kind of that's the negative of organized religion, um, because once you're ensconced into a set of teachings, you can't change them and you can't make it straight. You can't straighten it out. So I took a step back from all that stuff. Even though I grew up in a small religion, I took a step back from that and said, okay, well, I'm still a Christian, but I'm not interested in being stuck to these sets of ideals because I've already found flaws. So maybe sometimes it would be better to do some self study and stuff like that. If you're really an intelligent and curious, and you really do believe that there's a God, but you don't know what one, because the pursuit of truth is not wrong. I will say this though: the pursuit of all knowledge is not as valuable as folks think. Some knowledge is too painful to obtain. So be careful with that, because I've made a few mistakes myself, and uh, yeah, let's just not go there. uh, like sticking your hand in a fire and just to see if it blisters or something like that. So, keep looking for truth, but don't do something so stupid that you harm yourself with, by looking for it. So, um, so that's my thoughts about agnosticism and why it's respectable. And yeah, yep, much more, much more honest than atheism by far.